welcome to the deep dive. So we're jumping into this really interesting audio source you shared with us. It's all about personal agency versus, well, destiny.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Think of this as your quick path to understanding a viewpoint that could, really change how you see your own power in life. We're aiming to cut through some common beliefs here.
Exactly. And the central question really from the sources, how much control do we actually have over our lives? Over the things that happen to us.
Right. It's a timeless question, isn't it?
Definitely. And the speaker in your audio, they have a pretty strong take on it.
Yeah, they do. The audio brings up that common idea that so much is just down to, like, external stuff.
Like where you were born, your background, maybe just plain luck or fate.
Right. It's easy to feel like you're just being carried along sometimes.
But this speaker, they really challenge that directly. They push back hard.
How so?
Well, they basically argue that our lives are fundamentally shaped by us, by our own actions, our thoughts, our beliefs.
And you mentioned the information we let in.
Crucially, yes. What we feed our minds, they see that as the real architect of our experience.
Okay. Which, for you, wanting to get the core ideas quickly and, thoroughly, sounds pretty relevant.
Hope so.
So we're going to unpack this, look at the main arguments, keep it clear, engaging, and definitely not overwhelming.
Okay, that's good. Let's do it.
Right. So the speaker kicks things off with a really bold statement. Something like, our lives are in our own hands. Whatever happens, we are creating it ourselves.
Wow, yeah. That's putting it out there right away.
No kidding. It immediately puts the responsibility squarely on the individual, doesn't it?
It does. It's a direct move away from blaming, circumstances or anything external. A total shift.
Okay. And importantly, they do talk about the fact that people start in wildly different places. Some really tough beginnings.
Yeah.
They don't just gloss over that.
No, they acknowledge that reality. But here's the crucial bit, right?
Go on.
They say those difficult starts don't have to mean a negative life forever. They don't determine your destiny. They emphasize our ability, our power to change our thinking, and by doing that, change our actual lives. It's about agency, even when things are hard.
Got it. Agency despite the odds. So, following from that, they basically dismiss the whole idea of a pre-written fate.
Completely, yeah. They specifically say destiny doesn't dictate poverty or bad relationships or even having unhealthy children. It's a real break from that fatalistic view.
Which then makes sense of their critique of trying to, change your fate externally.
Exactly. They're skeptical about things like fortune telling or spells or rituals.
Why? Because it's based on a false premise.
That seems to be their point, that those methods assume a predetermined fate exists to be changed, which they fundamentally disagree with. They think it misunderstands how life actually works.
So what is their explanation then? How do things happen?
It comes back to the internal world. Always. Your thoughts, your beliefs, the stuff you're processing mentally moment by moment.
Right. So it's a continuous creation process, driven internally.
Precisely. And they talk about this idea of self-influence, basically that no one else can really affect your life.
Unless
you believe what they say, unless you give their words power in your own mind.
That's a strong claim. And it leads right into them saying, quite bluntly, something called destiny does not exist.
Right. And the reason they give is tied to their view of divine justice.
Okay, unpack that a bit. How does destiny clash with divine justice in their view?
Well, they argue that a preset destiny, especially one filled with suffering or failure, just doesn't align with the idea of a fair and loving God. It kind of forces you to rethink your assumptions about the divine.
I see. So their interpretation of God, based on religious texts they refer to, isn't one who sort of maps everything out in advance, not condemning people from birth.
Exactly. It's more like a God who's involved, but not as a micromanager pre-programming every single event in that fixed way.
Okay. So what's the alternative view of divine will they offer?
It's one where we as individuals are active co-creators of our lives. They use that phrase, whatever happens to you is because of what your hands have earned.
Emphasizing personal responsibility again, but within that divine context.
Yes. Which then leads to their point about blame.
Right. They say blaming God or society or leaders or family for your problems is misguided.
Essentially, yeah. They see it as misunderstanding where the real creative power lies, which is within yourself and your relationship with these universal laws or divine principles.
So it's less about victimhood and more about realizing your own, maybe untapped potential.
That seems to be the core message. Taking responsibility because that's where your power is.
And they back this up with personal experience too, right? Mentioning overcoming money problems.
They do. They share their own story of getting out of very difficult financial straits. They use it as evidence against the idea they were destined to struggle.
Yeah.
It adds a layer of, I've lived this.
Yeah, personal stories can be powerful. And then they express some surprise, don't they? That people still believe so strongly in fate today.
Yes, almost disbelief. Like, with all the modern knowledge and education, how can educated people still hold on to these fatalistic ideas?
Do they give examples of these kinds of beliefs?
Yeah, quite specific ones they've apparently encountered, like someone believing they're just destined to fail at marriage after several tries.
Okay.
Or someone believing they're destined to lose children after miscarriages.
Yeah.
Or this feeling of being stuck in financial struggle no matter what they do.
Wow. Those are heavy beliefs to carry.
Incredibly. And you can see how the speaker might argue that the belief itself could be, well, contributing to the outcome.
Right, that self-fulfilling prophecy idea.
Exactly. And tied to this, the speaker really pushes back against the notion that suffering is just God's will.
They question that directly.
Very directly. Like, what kind of God would want people to suffer misfortune? It challenges some very traditional interpretations.
So instead of God willing bad things, what's their explanation for why good things don't always seem to happen?
Okay, this is interesting. They talk about a kind of self-imposed limit. The idea is God only desires good for everyone, like inherently, but we block that flow through our own negative beliefs, our limited thinking. They use this analogy of putting up umbrellas to stop the rain of divine blessings.
Umbrellas against blessings. That's quite an image.
Isn't it? And they also use a teacher-student analogy.
How does that work?
Like, the teacher, God, has the best intentions and wants the student to learn and succeed. But if the student isn't receptive, isn't putting in the effort, or holds limiting beliefs about their own ability, they won't get the benefit. It requires active participation.
So it's not passive. God's goodness is there, but we need to be open to receiving it, essentially.
That's the idea. Their vision is of a God who wants everyone to have happiness, health, wealth, joy, peace, all the good stuff.
So if someone doesn't have those things, it's not because God is withholding them.
According to the speaker, no. It's because the individual's container, their mindset, their beliefs, is too small or somehow blocked. The limitation is on our end, not the divine sources.
Okay. That puts the power and the responsibility firmly back with the individual again.
Consistently, yes. And again, they use a personal example, this time about health.
What do they share?
They talk about having a long stretch of really good health, like no medication needed, after a past where they used to get sick often.
And they attribute that change
to a shift in their mindset. Not because God suddenly decided to make them healthier, but because they changed their thinking about health and their body.
So their confidence in this whole philosophy comes from seeing it work in their own life.
Very much so. They state that pretty clearly. It's not just theory for them.
Which then leads them to challenge the listener's ideas about God's will directly, right?
Yeah, they sort of ask, how would that even work? By what rules would God decide, okay, you succeed, but you, even though you're trying just as hard, you fail?
They question the mechanism.
Exactly. They express disbelief that a just God would deny success to someone genuinely striving, genuinely having faith, putting in the effort. It just doesn't compute in their framework.
So if effort and faith aren't always enough, what's the missing piece, according to them? Why do people still fail sometimes?
It comes back yet again to those underlying beliefs. Wrong beliefs or deep-seated fears that unconsciously sabotage your actions or your thinking.
Okay. Did you give an example they use?
They use that analogy of trying to see the sunrise.
Ah, yes. Tell me about that again.
If you want to see the sunrise, but you're facing west, it doesn't matter how early you get up or how hard you stare, you won't see it.
Right.
It's not because the sun is being mean or fate is against you. You're just pointed in the wrong direction. Your actions are misaligned with the natural law.
So effort needs to be aligned with the right mindset or belief.
That's the idea. And they give concrete examples of misaligned beliefs, too.
Like what?
Like wealth aversion. If you secretly believe rich people are bad or greedy, that belief might subconsciously stop you from becoming wealthy yourself, even if you consciously want more money.
Okay. A subconscious block.
Or health anxiety. If you're constantly convinced your immune system is weak and germs are super powerful threats everywhere,
That very belief could make you more susceptible.
that's their argument. highlighting that powerful mind-body connection driven by belief.
So it all hinges on these universal laws they mentioned.
Yeah, they frame it like that. Events happen according to these divine or universal laws, not arbitrary whims.
And the most important law, in their view.
It really seems to boil down to whatever you believe will happen to you.
Simple, but profound.
Very. And they suggest this explains why people have such different experiences, why one person finds making money easy and another finds it a constant struggle. Same world, different beliefs, creating different realities.
And the health example reinforces that too. Believing your body is weak versus believing it's strong.
Exactly. It's about the power we give to external things versus the power we recognize within ourselves, primarily through our beliefs.
It's definitely an invitation to really look at what you hold to be true about yourself and the world.
For sure.
Okay, so wrapping this up, this deep dive into the audio source really brings out this powerful perspective, doesn't it? It hammers home personal responsibility, the impact of our beliefs.
Yeah, how our beliefs actively shape our lives, and it directly counters that whole idea of a fixed destiny controlled by outside forces.
Right. The core message seems to be our thoughts, our beliefs, they aren't just passive things floating around. They're the actual drivers of what we experience.
The primary drivers, yeah. Both the good stuff and the challenges.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Considering these ideas we've talked through, what are some of your own really deep-seated beliefs? Maybe ones you haven't really thought about consciously.
Yeah, and how might those beliefs be, quietly shaping your life in ways you haven't fully realized?
Exactly. It's definitely worth reflecting on what this perspective might mean for your own sense of agency, your own potential for change.
Absolutely. Food for thought.
Definitely. Well, thanks for diving deep with us on this one.